Welcome back, everybody, to this series on the Legions and Primarchs. This episode is on the 3rd Legion, the Emperor's Children, and their Primarch, Fulgrim, the Phoenician. Now, this Legion and Primarch, I feel like I know the most about them out of a lot of the Legions, out of the 18 that we're going to be talking about in this series. And that is mostly because they have one of the biggest books in the Horus Heresy literature. So this book, if you have seen it or have read it yourself, or if you go look at it, it has one of the higher page counts, and it goes into some of the most detail in a single book about the corruption and downfall of this legion. And I really love the book Fulgrim and how it depicts the slow and steady descent of this legion into the raving, maddening corruption that they find themselves in. Now, a bit about this legion. They started out as one of the smallest legions due to a blight that wiped out their gene seed, or, the glands that turn someone into a space marine were wiped out completely for this legion. And until they found Fulgrim, it was going to be incredibly slow going to regrow more gene seed for this legion. And eventually they did find Fulgrim, and with the help of Fabius Bile, the chief apothecary, working on their efforts along with Fulgrim, they were able to bring this legion back from the brink. And because of the smallness of the legion, they spent a lot of their time around the Luna Wolves, which is Horus's legion, an eventual main antagonist of the Horus Heresy as a setting. So Fulgrim, I would not say that he was swayed to the traitor side because of Horus, but definitely at least part of it is because they were friends for a very long time. They had a very tight bond, having worked together early in the Great Crusade. However, I do believe that the Emperor's Children Legion would have possibly stayed loyalist. It almost happened, and the only reason it did not happen is because by that linchpin of a moment occurring, Slaanesh, the chaos god of pleasure and excess, had already sunk its talons into Fulgrim at this point. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor's Children led a compliance effort against a world called Lair. And on this world was an alien species of basically serpent men, for lack of a better term. They were sinuous and had many different forms, and they were vicious and a hard to fight species. They lived on these giant floating oh my goodness. Not bikini, coral type of establishments. And I was thinking of Bikini Atoll, believe it or not, when I said that. So laugh at me if you will, but it had relevance. That is a coral area in the Pacific Ocean, if you didn't know. Anyway, so they fought that compliance there, and at the end of that compliance, Fulgrim found a sword that was in an altar room. This sword contained in it a demon of Slaanesh, which over time slowly corrupted Fulgrim's mind and eventually led to their downfall as a legion, along with the body modification that this alien species was known for was adopted by the Emperor's Children for their own marines. So with the help of Fabius and the blessing of Fulgrim, Fabius rewired the entire legion, for the most parts, nerves to offer pleasure instead of pain when any damage was done to them. So a lot of the Emperor's Children and Marines became obsessed with reaching a new high of a masochistic type of pain pleasure threshold, and we see that pretty distinctly later on. There's an incident during what's called the Drop Site Massacre, where the first captain of this legion, Julius, is fighting with a Iron Hands legionary, and the Iron Hands legionary lands a very vicious blow across the face of this first captain, and he thinks that Julius is writhing in pain on the ground, and he's shocked to find that Julius is writhing in pleasure and is laughing maniacally about it, and that allows for Julius to stand back up and say, "Thanks, that one was especially exquisite," and then just eviscerate the man. So that's the kind of things that the Loyalists had to start dealing with the Emperor's Children. They became more durable through this process, but also became a raving legion of madmen. Their demeanor before their fall was one of regalness, and they sought perfection in all things. And they were, while they were considered an arrogant legion, I wouldn't actually consider Fulgrim super arrogant, believe it or not. Fulgrim's upbringing was actually a pretty humble one for a Primarch. On the planet he landed, Chemos, he lived in mines and learned how to run the mines, and his adopted parents were basically slaves. So Fulgrim, believe it or not, came from pretty humble beginnings, and I think part of his desire to bring perfection and elevate himself was part of that, and part of just like I don't know, just if you read the book especially, Fulgrim does not come across himself super arrogant until later when he starts getting more corrupted by the blade. Like, he had almost an innocence to his joy for arts and beauty and the love of different aspects of that. And I mean, Fulgrim was even, I think, well regarded amongst many of his Primarch brethren, and Fulgrim cared deeply for several of his brothers. He, of course, has a legendary bond with Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands Legion, and of course that curdles over the course of the Horus Heresy, and they're split amongst traitor and loyalist ends. However, Fulgrim is, I would say, he tends to desire the best and see the best in his brothers. He was, for example, sincerely worried for his brother Conrad Kurtz and his mental illnesses, which we'll talk about during their part of this series. Fulgrim seemed to care a lot about things, and then to the point where, I think that if he had not have touched that blade, the linchpin moment was he was behind Horus's fleet with his fleet. And at this point, Fulgrim had been tipped off that Horus might be corrupted and beyond saving. And Fulgrim had a thought, if I open fire now, I could end this before it began. And then, out of nowhere, comes Lord Commander Eidolon, who, has the Lyre Blade. And Fulgrim's like, I don't even remember calling for this thing. But he puts it around his waist, he buckles it on, and immediately Fulgrim forgets about opening fire on Horus and instead goes to meet with him. And from that point on, Fulgrim ends up with the traitors. And then, not too long after this, Fulgrim, during the events of the heresy, I believe he becomes the first Primarch to ascend to Demon Princedom as well. He is the first one of the 4 during the heresy to fall to each of the aspects of chaos. He is the first one. And he does that, and his legion kind of breaks apart. It starts breaking apart at the seams a bit because, I feel like the Emperor's Children embody a lot of what people picture chaos as a force to be in 40k. They are raucous and crazy and maniacal and nefarious and just everything you can expect from a chaos legion. I feel like Fulgrim's legion ends up embodying, to the point where even other traitor legions, like the Iron Warriors, who at one point met up with them, were like, what the actual heck is going on with these guys? These guys are insane. They look like an insane carnival of just insanity. They do. And because of that kind of falling apart of the Legion, by the time that we get to the Siege of Terra, towards the end of the Horus Heresy here, the Emperor's Children Legion are a essential component to the War Master's plan, but they end up failing to really be of much help because they are just so distracted and kind of fickle-minded as a Legion of Slaanesh would be, trying to seek that next higher experience and constantly seeking for that over and over again. Rogal Dorn of the Imperial Fists, leading the defense of the Loyalists on Terra, even says that, like, you know, I basically convinced Fulgrim to leave because he was bored. But, if Fulgrim and his Legion was focused, they probably would have defeated us there. I mean, at their zenith, the Emperor's Children Legion as a whole were a very effective fighting force. They were considered one of the best legions, I'd say, at the top of their game and willing to do what is necessary to win their battles, and especially in that striving for perfection and trying to perfect their fighting prowess and their different abilities. And we get some of the best loyalist characters from the Emperor's Children Legion. You have Saul Tarvitz, who is a captain in the Legion, and he is such an amazing stalwart of a character for what was good about the Legion at one point. You have Rylanor the Ancient, who's a dreadnought, who is also an exemplar for what the Legion once stood for. Solomon Demetor, he is also an amazing character, and all these men, you can see what was so good about the Legion, and you could see how Fulgrim had taught them, and you can see what was lost. And again, you see kind of the tragedy of their fall, especially when those men are fighting a desperate last stand on Isstvan 3, where the traitors culled all the loyalists from each of their legions. And so you get to see a glimpse of what was lost with the loss of these men, and that spark go out in that legion. I really love how the Emperor's Children looked in the Heresy setting. They have a really cool armor theme and a really cool style to them. They have a really, like, what do you call it? I'm losing my words here a little bit. They have a desire to bring beauty to things. So, like, they're one of the only legions that really likes the Remembrancers, which were a group of men and women, they were kind of like news media a little bit, and also artists and craftsmen and things sent throughout the legions. As you can imagine, some of the Space Marine legions did not like Remembrancers, but the Emperor's Children really did. They really liked them on their ships and liked to meet with them and discuss things with them and read books together with them. Like, at their height, the Emperor's Children were sort of a scholarly legion. They read books. They learned to, how to craft things. They learned how to do sculptures and artwork and things like that. And of course, all that was corrupted and perverted by Slaanesh over time. But at their height, their flag, their capital ships were galleries of artwork, of marble, statues, of frescoes and paintings and things like that. And they definitely lived up to, the Phoenix kind of naming convention. They were like a phoenix rising from the ashes of their old, nearly dead self. And then it's interesting to watch how they were corrupted by Slaanesh. All those ideals were corrupted, and we get the raving insanity of the Legion towards the end of the Heresy. And yeah, they are one of the most, they have one of the best written books about them, and as a legion and as a fighting force, they were a force to be reckoned with. Now, in the 40k era, 10,000 years later, I don't know too much about the Emperor's Children, other than I think in the most recent lore, there's rumblings of them being active again. There's sightings of Fulgrim leading his men into battle, and the Emperor's Children kind of broke up into war bands and wasn't really a more structured legion after the heresy, but it seems like with Fulgrim coming back, also Lucius the Eternal is at his side. One of the 4 champions of chaos that, ended up being for the Emperor's Children. And they have been seen apparently sacking worlds with the resurgence of chaos forces during this latest part of the series. But other than that, Emperor's Children Marines have kind of shown up as individuals and in small groups in several of the books. They appear usually a single kind of terror Marines because, they often have very exaggerated armor and looks to them. They might have like stretched their face out into a rictus grin or have hooks everywhere. Like they're probably one of the most horrifying of the Chaos Marine types to run into. I do not recommend but I do not recommend running into them. If you're going to run into a Chaos Space Marine, you better hope it's Ahriman from the Thousand Suns, because he might at least have a chat with you before just burning you or something. But if you run into an Emperor's Children warband, your fate is not going to be a good one. It's probably about as good as you can expect from getting kidnapped by the Dark Eldar, which, if you know anything about the Dark Eldar, that is also not a good fate to be captured by them either. So they are definitely one of the most terrifying Chaos Legions. And if you hear that they are coming to your world, you better fight as hard as you can, because if you do not fight, all of you are going to be rendered down into pleasure powder to be snuffed by them. I mean, they are a torturous, horrifying legion, even amongst the Chaos Legions. Like, I mean, if you got invaded by a different Chaos Legion, like the Black Legion, Abaddon's Legion, horrible still, but they will hopefully just kill you. The Emperor's Children will not just kill you. So they are definitely going from the pinnacle of nobility and seeking that, they became one of the most depraved legions. And I have to think that Slaanesh finds that pretty hilarious. Just part of why Slaanesh targeted them in a sense and wanted them to corrupt. Although interestingly enough, just a little interesting tidbit, it is said that Jagate Khan of the White Scars Legion and Fulgrim were switched places, and that it was actually Jagatai that Slaanesh originally wanted and instead got Fulgrim. So I don't know. I don't know if that's official or if that's just something from the 40k lore discussions that is talked about, but interesting if true that, if you would have had Fulgrim leading the White Scars Legion and Jagatai leading the Emperor's Children, how things would have changed, because Jagatai ends up becoming a very pivotal character in the in the Siege of Terra. And interestingly enough, both Fulgrim and Jagatai Khan are considered superlative swordsmen and great fighters. That is something regarding Fulgrim. He is, I would consider, one of the top fighters. He was an incredible swordsman, but not only that, but I mean, he was willing to just get down and dirty in fighting as well, especially before his fall. I mean, he punched an avatar of Cain to death with his bare hands, and burning his hands in the process, and had to keep them bandaged for a while until they healed up. I mean, Fulgrim, for all of his pomp and panoply of, brilliance, he was a savage of a fighter sometimes. I mean, just because he was kind of considered a peacock and his men are considered peacocks, they were all fighters at the end of it. They would brawl with you. They will defeat you. And regarding that, I mean, the Fulgrim is, I consider him like willing to get down and dirty, but also just willing to fight, to his final breath. Like he is considered, in my opinion, one of the better fighters. And he's one of the only Primarchs to have killed another Primarch. In the Iron Hands Legion, Primarch Ferrismanus, he beheads him, and he also mortally wounds Robot Goleman of the Ultramarines Legion. So Fulgrim did that in his demon form, which only enhances power and ability. The only fight he ever lost that I can think of looking back is just recently in the Siege of Terra against Rogal Dorn. However, Fulgrim he bailed out of that fight because he was just done with the siege. Less so than Rogal Dorn actually really hurting him. However, Rogal Dorn kind of hurt his pride, which would hurt a demon prince of Slaanesh more than anything. If you were able to get to the heart of them and their emotional core, that would hurt them more than any physical wound you could deal them. And so this is a little bit about the 3rd Legion and their Primarch. I don't want to drone on and on in these. I can get more detailed if people end up liking this channel and this content, so I will wrap that up for here now. And I thank you for tuning in. If you have chosen to tune in here, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. And as always, bring your light into the dark places. Thank you and have a great day or night wherever you are.